So, have you ever stopped to think about how scientists navigate the absolutely massive, invisible landscape of our DNA? I mean, how do they find one single gene, maybe one that's causing a disease, among billions of letters of genetic code? Well, let's get into it, because the answer is this brilliant concept called molecular markers. Think of it as a GPS for our genome. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the challenge of mapping DNA, then we'll introduce this idea of a genetic GPS. After that, we'll look at the actual tools scientists use, we'll zoom in on one classic technique to see how it works, and finally, we'll talk about why any of this really matters in the real world. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the fundamental problem. For the longest time, the genome was kind of like an uncharted ocean. We knew it was huge, but we had no map. And that leads to this central question, the one that really stumped geneticists for ages. You can't just, look through a microscope and see the gene for, say, brown eyes. It's all just an incredibly long string of chemical code. So, how in the world do you find your way around? You see, the very first genetic maps were based entirely on things you could see with your own eyes. We call them morphological markers. Think back to Gregor Mendel and his famous pea plants. Purple flowers versus white flowers, wrinkly peas versus smooth peas. Those were the only signposts they had. But here's the catch. Those visible traits are a tiny, tiny fraction of the whole genetic story. All the rest of the DNA, it was a complete black box.
And this, right here, is where the breakthrough happened. Scientists had a huge realization. They didn't need to see the gene itself. They just needed reliable landmarks, signposts, along the way.
And that solution was the molecular marker. So the key takeaway here is that it's a specific, recognizable piece of DNA that's always at a known location. It isn't necessarily a gene itself, but it acts like a little flag or a pin dropped on a map. Honestly, the best way to wrap your head around this is to think about driving down a long highway. Even if you don't know exactly where your exit is, if you know it's just after mile marker 157, you're going to find it. Molecular markers are literally those mile markers. They give scientists a reference system to navigate the billions of base pairs in our DNA. So what makes a good marker? Well, first, it has to have a fixed address on a chromosome. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, they're often polymorphic. All that means is that they have slight variations from person to person. And it's that variation that lets us tell different chromosomes apart. And finally, they are way, way easier to find and analyze than the genes we're actually looking for, which makes them the perfect reference points. Now, scientists didn't just come up with one type of marker. Oh no, they developed a whole toolkit, a whole variety of these things for different kinds of jobs. This table just gives you a little taste of some of the common ones. You've got RFLPs, which we're going to dive into in just a second. There are STRs, you've probably heard of those from crime shows and forensics. And then there are SNPs, which are just tiny single-letter changes in the DNA code. Each one has its own strengths, but they all do that same basic job. They act as a signpost on the genome. To really understand how this works in practice, let's zoom way in on one of the classic techniques, RFLP. It stands for Restriction Fragment Length Polymorphism. Yeah, it's a mouthful. The star of the show for RFLP is a tool called a restriction enzyme. Just think of them as tiny molecular scissors, but they are incredibly precise. A specific enzyme, like this one called EchoRI, will only cut DNA when it finds its exact target sequence, in this case, GAATTC. It just floats right past everything else. The process itself is actually pretty simple in concept. First, you take a DNA sample and you add your molecular scissors, the restriction enzyme. It goes to work chopping up the DNA wherever it finds that target sequence. Then you separate all those little fragments by size. And finally, you use a special probe that lights up just the fragment you care about so you can actually see it. And this is where the magic really happens. If a cutting site is monomorphic, that means everyone has it. The enzyme cuts in the same place for everyone and you get identical fragments. But if a site is polymorphic, some people might have the cutting site and others might not, all because of a tiny mutation. And that variation is what creates different sized DNA fragments. That's the whole length polymorphism part of RFLP. The source material puts it perfectly. It says that because of these tiny differences in DNA, people can vary on whether they even have this specific cutting site. So let's use that as our example and look at 3 different people. Okay, so here they are. Individual 1 has that specific cutting site on both copies of their chromosome. Individual 2, on the other hand, is missing that site on both copies. And then you have individual 3, who's a heterozygote. They have the site on one chromosome, but not on the other. So the question is, how does this invisible difference actually show up in the lab?
And bam, this is the result. Just look at this. It's so cool. For individual 1, the enzyme cuts and we get a smaller fragment, about 3,000 base pairs. For individual 2, the enzyme can't cut, so it leaves a single, much larger fragment of 4,500 base pairs. And what about individual 3, our heterozygote? Well, the enzyme cuts one chromosome, but not the other, so you get both fragments. Just like that, a hidden genetic difference becomes a clear, visible pattern.
So that's a really fascinating lab technique, right? But what's the point? Why does having a GPS for the genome actually matter in our lives? Well, the applications are absolutely huge. By tracking which markers get inherited along with a disease in a family, researchers can zero in on the location of the disease gene itself. In agriculture, they can find markers that are linked to really valuable traits, like bigger fruit or plants that can survive a drought. They even help evolutionary biologists trace genetic variation and figure out how different species are related. It is, without a doubt, a cornerstone of modern genetics. And this scale we're talking about here is just massive. Scientists aren't just looking at 1 or 2 of these markers. To build a really useful map, they analyze hundreds, sometimes thousands of these markers spread all across every chromosome. What they get is this super high-resolution grid that lets them navigate the genome with just incredible precision. Which brings us to a final thought. We started out with a map that only showed a few big visible landmarks. Now we are building genetic maps with a level of detail and accuracy that's just mind-blowing. So the real question is, as these maps get closer and closer to being perfect, what new secrets about our biology, our history, and our health will they finally unlock?